Imagine this. You're sitting at a desk snowed under with textbooks, highlighting every other sentence with a marker because, after all, everything seems important. And in your mind, you're already planning how you'll become a Nobel Prize winner. After 3 hours of studying like this, about as much information remains in your head as water in a sieve. Congratulations! You've joined the company of 90% of students who study with roughly the same effectiveness as cavemen learning quantum physics. But wait, it gets even more fun. Those same 90% are genuinely convinced they're doing everything right. They sit in the library until closing time, churn out notes the size of War and Peace, and proudly tell their friends, "I studied a full 8 hours today." And what's the result? Knowledge evaporates faster than money after payday. The exam turns into a game of Russian roulette with a textbook where the main strategy is, maybe I'll get lucky. The secret is that real learning requires less time but more brain power. But don't worry, it's actually very easy. I've done all the research for you. I'll show you 6 scientifically proven methods to learn faster and remember for the long term. Here they are. First, the 80-20 rule. Meet the most brutal discovery in the world of education. 80% of what you cram is completely useless for the exam. While you're heroically memorizing what color socks Napoleon wore at the Battle of Waterloo, the exam will ask about his main military reforms. This is called the Pareto Principle, and it works everywhere. 20% of your efforts produce 80% of the results. The remaining 80% of effort, well, they mainly give you the feeling that you tried very, very hard, plus some pretty rainbow-colored highlights in your textbook. A typical perfectionist student reads the textbook from cover to cover, memorizes every footnote, knows the biographies of all the minor characters, yet has no idea which topics actually matter. It's like preparing for a date by studying the entire history of perfume instead of simply taking a shower. Smart students do something else. They go to the instructor and ask, "What will be on the exam?" Then they study only that. Brutal? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. Stop being a collector of useless knowledge. Find your 20% and become an expert in it. Second, how to turn your brain into a racing car with a timer. Here's a psychological paradox for you. Give yourself the whole day to study, and you'll be picking your nose until evening. Set a 30-minute timer, and suddenly you turn into an academic Schumacher, tearing down the track of knowledge at insane speed. Why does this happen? Your brain is a crafty manipulator. When there's plenty of time, it thinks like this. The whole day is ahead. I can relax, check Instagram, think about the meaning of life, rewatch my favorite memes. But when the timer starts ticking, it panics. Oh my God, only 30 minutes. I need to work like crazy. And that's when the magic begins. Instead of sluggishly chewing over information, an emergency knowledge absorption mode kicks in. No philosophical reflections, no distractions by the cat outside the window, just pure concentration. Plus, after 30 minutes, you've earned a perfectly legitimate 5-minute break. You can scroll through social media without any guilt. That's not procrastination. It's a scientifically justified break. So it turns out the most effective way to study is to create artificial panic. Under pressure, your brain works better than an expensive supercomputer. Third, Einstein's idiot test. Explain it to a 5-year-old. Albert Einstein was not only a genius, but also a ruthless exposer of pseudo-intellectuals. His golden rule was simple. If you can't explain something in simple words, you don't understand it yourself. Translated into modern language, most top students are just advanced parrots with good memories. Picture this scene. You've spent 3 hours cramming quantum mechanics. You can quote the textbook word for word and already feel like the next Stephen Hawking. Now try explaining the Heisenberg uncertainty principle to your grandmother or your 5-year-old nephew. Well, it's when particles are it's complicated. Congratulations, you've just failed Einstein's test. The Feynman Technique works like a lie detector for your knowledge. You can juggle scientific terms, great, but that's not understanding yet. Real understanding begins when you can explain a complex topic using simple analogies and everyday examples. The funniest part is this: While you're struggling to translate the complicated into simple language, your brain finally starts to truly understand the subject. Fourth, why your brain pretends it remembers everything, but actually remembers nothing. Your brain is a great actor and a pathological liar. When you read the textbook for the 100th time, it happily nods, "Yes, yes, I know all this. I recognize every word." But in the exam, it suddenly switches to amnesia mode and acts as if it's seeing this information for the first time in its life. Sound familiar? Congratulations, you've fallen for the illusion of knowledge, your brain's favorite con trick. Here's the catch. Recognition and recall are two different processes. When you read photosynthesis occurs in chloroplasts, your brain says, "Oh, I've heard this somewhere, so I know it." But try closing the book and reproducing that information. Suddenly, it turns out your head is emptier than outer space. Active recall works like a strict examiner for your brain. No hints, no, yes, right, I remember now. Only harsh reality. Either you know it or you don't. And what's surprising is that these intense interrogations actually force the brain to truly remember the information instead of just pretending to. Fifth, why your brain works like a nightclub and what the gym has to do with it. Here's a shocking news. While you're sleeping, your brain turns into the most exclusive nightclub in the city. But instead of dancing, there's a VIP after-party for your memories, where information is neatly sorted onto shelves and all the unnecessary stuff is thrown into the trash. Now, imagine a genius who decides not to sleep the night before an exam. That's like shutting down the club right in the middle of the party. All the effort you put in during the day simply evaporates because the brain never had time to digest the information. But wait, it gets even more interesting. It turns out that even a simple walk acts like a memory-enhancing drug. 10 minutes of walking and your brain suddenly works better than after 3 cups of coffee. Why? Because movement speeds up blood circulation, delivering more oxygen to the brain. It's like upgrading your processor in real time. And you keep sitting at your desk, slowly suffocating your neurons with a lack of oxygen, then wondering why you're thinking like a sleepy sloth. The funniest part is this: the best exam prep strategy is to get a good night's sleep and go for a walk. It sounds like an excuse, but it's science. Sixth, the brain vomiting technique and why it works better than cramming. Meet the most brutal way to test your knowledge, the brain dump technique. It sounds disgusting. Perfect, because your brain finds this process unpleasant, which means it remembers it far better. The principle is painfully simple. You read a chapter, close the textbook, and then vomit everything you remember onto paper. No peeking, no, wait, what was that about mitochondria? Just dump the contents of your head out like a sack of potatoes. At this moment, most students panic. "I don't remember anything. I only wrote 2 sentences. Excellent. That's the truth of your knowledge. What you thought was solid understanding after reading was just a pretty illusion kindly created by your lying brain. The most sadistic part of this method comes next, when you open the textbook and see how much you forgot. But those exact gaps turn into superglue for memory. The brain tells itself, "Damn it, I messed up again. I'd better remember this properly." The result? The information gets embedded so deeply into your memory that you'll never be able to rip it out again. So, let's sum it up. To learn faster, we need the following. First, the 80-20 rule. 20% of the material you study gives you 80% of the results. Focus on the topics that appear most often on exams. Second, the 30-minute sprint method. 30 minutes of intense study plus a 5-minute break creates a sense of urgency and boosts concentration. Third, the Feynman Technique. Explain complex concepts as if you were talking to a 5-year-old. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Fourth, active recall. Testing yourself is twice as effective as passive reading. Close the book and try to recall the key points. Fifth, the role of sleep and physical activity. The brain stores information during sleep, not while you're awake. Even a 10-minute walk improves memory. Sixth, the brain vomiting technique. Read a chapter, then write down everything you remember without peeking. Instant memory boost. Bonus, the main principle. Don't study harder, study smarter, subscribe, and become better.